Hi everyone and welcome to the event. We'll just wait a few more minutes for anyone else to arrive and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we're good to start. Just give me 1 second to make sure everything's in order, then we can get going. Okay, let's get started. So welcome everyone to the first of our customer webinars. We're planning on these being more or less a monthly event. And the main purpose of these is to go through some of the more technical aspects of your Infigo software. So actually every individual webinar will go through and cover a different topic to give you some more insight into different areas of your Infigo software. Now, my name is Sam. I'm the Academy Manager here at Infigo. So anyone who's watched any of the Academy videos or anything like that may already be familiar with my voice. But my main role is to cover off all of the training and also to create on-demand resources so that you can help yourselves as well when it comes to actually learning how to use our software. Now, as you know, when you signed up for this, the topic of today's webinar is an introduction to Infigo. Introduction being the operative word. We've got 1 hour to get through quite a lot of content today. So I will be going through some of this stuff in quite high level. Okay, so hopefully the screen share is working for everybody. What you can see on the screen there is an agenda. I'll make sure that this presentation is distributed after the webinar as well. You can see we've got a lot of stuff to get through, and it's going to try and cover all of the fundamentals of Invent. starting with the absolute basics of what is Invent, going all the way through to how you would get things out of Invent and into your actual Infigo platform in Mega Edit. So if you do have any questions as we're going through this process, please do leave them within the Livestorm app. There should be a questions button somewhere on your screen. I have tried to reserve some time for a Q&A at the end of the session. If for whatever reason we don't get time to do that, if time gets away from us, I will take those queries offline and reply to them separately. So if any questions come up as you're going through, please do type them in. We'll try and get to them. If not, you'll still get an answer later on. So what I actually want to do very quickly is just start off with a little bit of audience participation, just a couple of polls, just to see if we can actually gauge how many of the people on this call are currently using Mega Edit and Invent. So you'll have to forgive me, I'm quite new to this particular app. So let me just make one of these live to begin with. So hopefully you can see that. Don't worry too much if you can't. So this is your business currently using Mega Edit? So just let us know if you are currently using it or if you're not currently using it and you're interested to do so. And I'll activate a second one as well, which is how many people within your business are using Infigo Invent. So what we're going to be going through today. So let me just enable that one as well. As I say, hopefully you can see those. Not too big of a problem if you can't. Okay, so let's start with the main presentation. I'm very wary of the time we've got available. So this is going to be a bit of a mix. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint. I'm going to switch between that and actually demonstrating within the Infigo software itself. So start off with what is Invent? So basic question. And in a nutshell, it is Infigo's plugin for Adobe InDesign. It allows you to configure dynamic product templates within the InDesign window itself. So rather than having to set up your entire templates within Mega Edit, where your actual artwork probably won't be to begin with, you do have the ability to actually completely configure your product templates within your primary design tool, which is InDesign in most cases. Once you've created those templates within Invent and within InDesign, you have the ability to export from Invent and then place them into Mega Edit, which is ultimately what your customers are going to be interacting with. And obviously, we'll go into more detail on that. And then critically, how do you get hold of it? The Invent plugin is free to download and install, and I'll show you how to do that now. Oh, in a moment. So next, how does Invent fit within Mega Edit and my storefront? So I think this step's quite important to understand where it actually fits into your workflow for generating products. So it's important to realize that Invent is not designed as a full replacement for Mega Edit. Your customers will still need to interact with Mega Edit, as that's what will be available on your actual storefront itself. What Invent is designed to do is to facilitate easier creation of templates and then seamlessly converted from Invent into Mega Edit, where your customers can utilize them, or you can perform further editing on them within Mega Edit if you wish to do so. So over on the right-hand side there, you can see a very simple diagram, hopefully representing that. So you'll have your early stage design tools, and then once you actually get your artwork into Adobe InDesign, that's when it comes hand in hand with the Invent plugin, which, as I've said, works within InDesign itself. Once you've configured your template, you export it from Infigo Invent and take it into Mega Edit on your actual storefronts themselves. And this is where your customers will actually interact with them. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at the typical Invent products on your actual storefront itself. So I say typical in this respect, as your Invent and your Mega Edit products can be completely customized to how you want to show them, as to how you want your customers to interact with them. Typical in this case is just what you would generally get out of Invent as, let's say, a basic user or someone who's just getting started. So I've got a couple of examples which I will probably show quite a few times during this presentation. Very basic. We'll use a business card just to keep it nice and simple. Over on the left-hand side, and I will expand the window when necessary, you can see Invent within InDesign. And then over on the right-hand side, you can actually see the same product, but taken into an Infigo storefront and shown on Mega Edit. So if I just expand this, just to show us how our typical Invent product might look on our storefront. So over on the left-hand side, as with any Mega Edit products, you would have various different tabs that you can access, which may control things such as background selections that you've enabled, clip art, upload some different imagery or different artwork in that tab. Again, that's not mandatory. We have got the ability to hide that tab if you don't want to use it. And then over on the right-hand side is one of the beautiful things from Invent, where you can actually create forms where users can interact with the forms themselves to create changes on the artwork. So using Invent, as with Mega Edit, you still have the ability to allow users to interact with the artwork itself. So let's say if we want to allow them to change text or something like that, you can set it up so they can do it on the artwork. But also over on the right-hand side, we have the ability to set up these forms. Now, this allows our users to interact with these particular forms themselves to actually change the information on the artwork. And again, we'll see all this as we're going through this process. I'm just trying to find the right screen. Okay, so downloading and installing Invent. It's a really simple process, four-step process, really. So the main place to get the Invent plugin is actually on our Help Center. So I'm going to start switching tabs again here. So if you navigate to our Help Center, which hopefully you all know how to do, but of course you can ask away if you don't know, and then simply type in downloading or installing Invent. Then you'll have access to an entry on our knowledge base, and all you need to actually do to get hold of the Invent plugin is to put in a few details here and click submit. That just lets us know that you have requested access to the particular plugin, but we don't need to approve it or anything. You will get instant access and ability to download this. And there we go. Now, you can't install the plugin directly as you would any application. You do need to install it via an extension manager for Adobe. Now, there's a couple that we recommend, and they're, again, detailed on this particular article. We've got Anastasia, which is the one that I've got on my system. And if that doesn't work for whatever reason, you've got a second option of AE Scripts. Both of those, very simple. You can just download them directly from that particular website. And then it's simply a case of opening the extension manager. So if I open up Anastasia on mine, for example, go to InDesign, and then I'm simply installing the plugin that I installed from this, downloaded from this link here. And it should be as easy as that to actually install the plugin. Once you've got to that stage, if you still have InDesign open, you may need to close it and open it again, but it's just actually activating the window within InDesign itself. So that's easy to do. You just go to Window at the top of your InDesign screen, go down to Extensions, and then you can see Infigo Invent. And when you've actually got that activated, it'll either pop up as a separate window up on the right-hand side, or it will be included in one of your tabs. Okay, so let's take a closer look at Invent itself, actually within InDesign, starting off with adding resources. So the process I'm going to follow here is actually fairly linear. So we've got the Infigo Invent tab open on the right-hand side, and then we've got various different sub-tabs available. And it is quite, as I say, it's a linear process. Generally speaking, we can go from left to right to make a basic Invent template, starting off with our resources. Now, so resources in this sense allow us to add assets to our Invent template. Now, assets in this case come in various different forms. It could be images that you want to include in your background. Actually, if I click on Add Resource Set here, we can see a list of them. So you'll see we've got background sets, clip art sets, font sets that we might want to include, text libraries. So that's, let's say, for example, on this scenario here, we might have a few addresses that you might be able to choose from. So that would be part of a text library. And we can do color sets as well. But generally speaking, these are all functioning in a very similar way. So these are essentially acting as folders where you can store items for later use. And the things that you put in the resource sets within your Invent file will also get saved within the file itself, so that when you transfer the file over to MegaEdit, the resources are taken with them. So if I skip back to, I've got a lot of different tabs to choose from, just to give you some context on what those resources will look like when you take them into MegaEdit itself. So those of you that are familiar with MegaEdit might know that you have to assign things such as a canvas selection or clip art categories, spot colors to your actual MegaEdit products themselves. When you bring resources over from Invent to MegaEdit, it's essentially creating a new version of these categories. So for example, if I go to clip art, you can see I've got a few clip art sets in here which are activated for that particular product. Okay. So I won't go through that in much detail based on the time we've got, and it is quite a simple setup for those. By the way, any of these topics that I'm covering in here, as I say, I'm doing it in quite a thin level of detail because of the introduction part of the title of this webinar. However, we do have a lot of Infigo Academy resources which go into these in a lot more detail. So if you are curious about a particular bit and you want to find quick resources on that particular topic, you can go to the Infigo Academy YouTube channel, and hopefully we'll have a video which covers that content. Equally, you might find some information in the Help Center as well, the same place where you can actually find the download link for Invent. Right, so once we've created our resources, the next thing we're going to do is to actually create some variables. So let me bring up my presentation again and give some context to this. So apologies for those that may already know this, but we're going to start off with what is a variable, just to give some context. So a variable means assigning a name to a value or a piece of information that can change or vary. So we're essentially giving a label to something that can hold different values. So for example, in our business card, which we've been showing here, variables would control things such as the name that's on our business card, the job title that's on the card, the address, the email. All those things can be controlled by variables. As you can see, for an example, over on the right-hand side there, Each of those different text boxes we've got or selection boxes is controlled by a variable within Invent itself. When it comes to creating variables within Invent, so first off, if I go to the Variables tab, which is the second one along, you can see in my demonstration here, I already have numerous different variables created. Adding a variable is nice and simple, so we can just click on the Add Variable button. And then all you need to do is to select the variable type, which is most suitable for the control you want to give customers for that particular part of your template. So what I mean by this, for example, is if you are adding a name field to a business card or something, then you would choose a text variable, as that allows you to input text. If you want to allow customers to change a logo or change an image which is on the business card, then you might choose an image variable, for example. A safe bet is always the drop-down variable when you want to be able to choose between a list of options. It is definitely, I've found, the most versatile of the variables that we have available. So if in doubt and it suits, use the drop-down variable. Each of these variables will have additional specification options based on the one you choose. So this could be things such as validating content that's placed within it. So just to give you context on this, if I go and edit one of my existing ones, let's go to my email, for example. Now the options will change slightly depending on the variable type, but you can see I've got things in here such as if there's a default value in here. So is there a value we want in there by default when we load up that particular template? Do we want to control any validation? So do we want to give it a maximum or a minimum string length? Do we want to assign any validation strings to it? So for example, on this one, I've said that it's preset to be an email address. What this means in this particular case is if someone enters something into that field which isn't formatted like an email address, it will throw an error and they'll need to fix that problem. Now that's just a snapshot of what it's capable of doing, of course, but hopefully it gives you a flavor. Okay, so the next thing we have here is the creation of forms. So we've got all of our variables. We've made a variable for all the things we want to change in our product. But then how do we actually display this to our end user itself or themselves? And this is done using our forms. So forms are essentially a collection of variables which will be displayed to our end customer. We saw an example of it in Mega Edit. If I stop losing that particular tab over on the right hand side. So this, for example, here is one of our forms. Now, it's important to remember that not all of the variables that you create need to be utilized on a form. Some of those variables might be controlled in the background and not be directly impacted by your customer themselves. And we'll cover a bit about that later on. Also, Invent does provide you with the capability to customize your forms, so you can control exactly what's shown to your end users. That being said, forms aren't even strictly required. If you want people to just interact with the actual artwork itself and not bother with a form, you can disable forms completely. It's completely up to you how you want to configure your product. And forms can be displayed either as a single form for all of the pages on your product, or you can have multiple forms. So different controls are shown when you're on different pages of the product. So let me just jump into Invent again and show you where these are controlled. So we're still on the variables tab here. We've got a list of all of our variables that we've created. And then if I just go to the Setup Forms button, it comes up with this screen here. Over on the left-hand side, you have your variable pool. That's just your list of all of the variables that you've created. And then over on the right-hand side is how you can actually construct the form and what you actually want to show on the form itself. So in my case, I've set it up so that there's a different set of controls on the different pages of my business card. So the front and the back of the business card. We can control that option using this switch icon. Back again. Now, all we want to do if we want to change what's on our form and control what's on our form is just to either click the use button on the variable we want to use or just drag and drop from the variable pool on the left to the relevant page on the right-hand side. And it's as easy as that. It's a drag and drop process where you can make quite a complex and visually appealing form. Okay, next we have adding logic to your templates. Now, as I've put there, interesting phrase I've used, but it is a true rabbit hole style topic. So if you get someone who's very experienced in creating these, you can get templates which have incredibly complex logic. So things which if you change one setting, it will have a knock-on effect on various other things and various other changes. Here we'll focus on just the basics, of course. What we're essentially doing as part of this inputting logic process is we are generating if statements which will perform tasks on your template based on the value of certain variables. So for those who might not be familiar with what if statements are, they allow logical comparison between a value and what you expect. And in that respect, in case you don't know what if statements are and you've never worked with them before, the way in which Infigo presents the creation of these if statements is designed to be really user-friendly, very interface-driven, enabling all users to utilize it rather than just specialists or those that have prior experience in creating this logic. So I won't dig too deep into this, but just to show you a little bit more context on what the if statements are and what we're essentially trying to create using this process. So the format of if statements, if our defined condition or conditions are met, then we'll perform a certain set of actions. If the conditions are not met, then we'll perform a different set of actions. So that's it in its most basic form. You may have used if statements in various different software packages. They're quite widely used. Excel probably being the most widely used of those, where the format will look something like that. And that is essentially what we're creating in the background. So if you need a bit further context on this and a bit of real world application, I've got a couple of those at the bottom of the screen there. So one example, which I can actually show to you in practice in a moment, if the background color that we select is a dark color, for example, then we can get it so that the system will automatically use a particular logo. Whereas if the dark color isn't chosen, then we might use the color logo. So it's controlling other variables based on the selection of one particular variable. To see that in action, just to give you some context, so we can see at the moment that I have a white background on my particular business card, and therefore it's using the color logo because that's the easiest to be seen. If I change that color to be dark on the background, I've got some logic configured, which means that it's actually automatically switching the logo. We could have it so that the user themselves is able to change the logo in the form, but seeing as this is something which we're considering necessary on our particular template, maybe we bypass that completely, we streamline the process, and we make it so that it switches automatically. That's one basic example of logic. It can go much, much deeper when you're ready to do so. Okay, so before I move on and forget about it, we'll show where those are actually created. So if I go to Invent, we're still on our Variables tab yet again, and I'm going to go to Setup Logic. So I've got a couple of logic conditions already specified in this particular example. One is the one we've just seen, which is actually switching the logo. So as you've seen that, we'll dig into the context of this particular one. So what we're essentially doing, very interface driven, as we've mentioned, is just creating the building blocks of that particular if statement. So we're saying in this case, for example, if our selected color set variable is equal to white, then our resulting action is to show a particular logo. Otherwise, if that condition isn't met, so if it's the navy background, then we're going to show the other logo. So hopefully that makes sense. As I say, we can go into much greater detail, have it do much more complicated things, but that hopefully should give you a flavor for the form logic. Okay, so the next step, once we've set up our resources and set up some of our variables, is to actually start making our templates dynamic. So by default, when you first start to create your template within Invent, all of the fields are essentially disabled. So none of them are considered to be dynamic if you would immediately extract that and take it to Mega Edit. And if you did take it to Mega Edit at that stage, it basically would compress the entire artwork to a few static layers. So what we actually need to do within Invent is to tell the system which of those fields is going to be variable. So which of them we want to actually control using our forms and actually using Mega Edit when we take it over there. So there's a few examples down there of what we can do when we're actually making it dynamic. The easiest thing is to show you, to be honest. So if I go back to Invent, the first thing we want to do is to go to the Properties tab. So again, we're just sort of making our way slowly across these tabs. If I go to Properties, and I'm going to just select one of my frames. So we'll just choose this one here, which is the name that's on the business card. Now, what you'll see by default, if I just go to a different one, is this kind of thing here. So you can utilize image frames and you can utilize text frames. When you click on them and you've got Invent activated, they will all be disabled by default. So they will not be dynamic in any way. When we click Enable, we get access to a series of settings which look something like this, but it might vary slightly based on the type of field that you have selected. And what we can basically do from in here is specify what, if anything, we want to link to that particular field. So the most basic example I can show you here is that we've got a variable which is name. So that's going to give us a text box where someone can write in their name for the business card. And then we need to link that variable to show or to populate this particular field. So to do that, we select the field, we activate it, and then we have a mapping in the center here where we can say we want to map a particular variable to that particular field. So you can see I've selected variable and I've selected name. Now that's the most common thing you're going to link, which is the actual content that's within there. But you'll notice if you look a bit further down that you have the ability to control the text color, the font size, the font options. So again, you can build on this basic template and get more and more detail in your Invent templates. Now, just as a bit of additional context, these properties tabs are generally split into two different sections. You have the text or the image tab, which is always the left-hand tab, which generally speaking is controlling what's within that particular field. So it will control the actual text itself, or it will control the image that's placed within the image frame. What you'll also have is the general tab. So maybe not strictly true, but the way I like to think about this is that it's more controlling the background of that particular, or the actual frame itself, let's say. So you can specify a color for that particular frame. So that will be the background color. And you also have the ability to restrict what your end users are going to be able to actually do with that frame. And again, that's going to be split into the different tabs. So if you've got one of these frames selected, go to either image or text in general. And then right at the bottom, you've got a set of constraints. You've got the same in the general tab as well. And this is a series of simple checkboxes, which is going to permit your customers to interact with this field in a particular way. So you can see, for example, if I'm on the general tab, this is controlling things which more relate to the actual frame itself. So am I allowed to resize, or is our customer allowed to resize the frame? Are they allowed to select it at all? Are they allowed to delete it? Whereas if I'm in the actual image or text properties, that's controlling things to do with the actual thing contained within the field. So am I allowed to stretch it? Am I allowed to crop it? Am I allowed to change the opacity? Various different settings. Now you can control these within MegaEdit as well. It's worth noting that whatever you set here, once you've exported it and take it to MegaEdit, which again we'll cover later, it doesn't mean that's the end of the process. You can still modify it within MegaEdit if you change your mind without having to come all the way back to Invent and do the whole process again. Okay. Right, so up next is grouping and suppression. So this is one I get asked about quite a lot in training sessions. So basically speaking, it's like, well, we've got an example on our business card down at the bottom there. If, for example, someone didn't have a phone number that they put on, then we'd automatically want the other fields on that artwork to sort of maybe move to counteract that. So if the phone number's not there, maybe the address moves up to fill the space. And we have the ability within Invent to configure that kind of behavior. And there's a couple of different ways we might go about this. Starting off with suppression. So we have the ability to automatically suppress unused variables to reposition the remaining fields. Now, let me show you what I mean by this. The example I'm using here, just zoom in so you can see a bit better, is this one here. So you'll see that I have a single text box, and within that text box, I have two items. So I have the job title and I have the email address. Now, those have both been specified as variables within the same text box, which is possible. I won't cover that on here, but there are Academy resources to take you through that process. But what I want to show you here, if I select that particular field, I have this option over on the right-hand side, which is variable suppression. And in a nutshell, what this means is that if I don't have an item, if I don't have any entry in one of those particular variables, then it will shift everything else to fill that space. So if I show you this on the MegaEdit storefront itself, so we'll use the same example. We've got the job title and the email address in one box. If I remove the job title for whatever reason, we can see that that variable has been suppressed completely and the email address has moved up to meet it. Okay, so the other option we have is the ability to group fields and to set rules as to how they respond to the behavior of fields around them. Now, again, I'll do a very basic example of this using this group of fields down here. So all I've done in InDesign itself, I've just selected those fields. If I can click the right area, you right click, and then in there, if you've not configured it like I have, there would be a group option. And that just basically groups those different fields together. And then we can utilize those groups within Invent itself. So I've got all of these here. I've grouped them all together. And I've also created a subgroup or an initial group, which is just covering the telephone options. Now, what we're essentially doing with this, if I click on that group, go to properties and then enable that, same process as we saw with the individual fields, you'll see we have the option to control what happens to that particular group. So we've got the ability to change spread behavior. So how do they work with each other? And what happens when something happens to another? And you can control a group master as well. So what I mean by group master, if something affects the behavior of one of the master field, then the subservient fields will follow it. So I'll show you this example first of all with the telephone group that I've got. So I've specified that our phone field, which is the actual phone number, is the group master, which means that the other field, this T, is working with it. And I've specified that so it hides that place, it hides that field if the placeholder is empty. So when we're actually on our product itself, if I get rid of the phone number that's in that box, you can see that it also gets rid of the other field that was subservient to that master field, let's say. So it's got rid of the T as well. We saw as well, and that's what the next point I was going to bring up, when we got rid of that phone number, it did change the position of the address and the email address to fill that void. And that's based on the larger group that we specified. And you can see that we can get quite detailed into this. So for example, if I specify that we don't want a phone number, as we saw just then, everything will shift up to meet it. If I specify that we don't want to include an address on there, the email address is brought right up. At this point, you've got to ask the question, is it really worth having a business card? But we'll carry on going. If I put a number back in there, you can see everything shifting around to meet this. Okay, I don't want to dig into this in too much detail, just in the interest of time. But hopefully, again, that gives you a flavor of the grouping and the suppression. Okay, and at this point, we are at the stage of converting our templates from Invent into MegaEdit. So what we're doing at this point is we're actually exporting our Invent templates in something we call a MEX format, so MEX. And we're exporting that directly from InDesign. And then we can very easily import it into our Infigo storefront. And your choices are, you can either create a brand new MegaEdit product and just directly import the MEX file if you want to. Alternatively, if you're kind of going through an iterative process, so within InDesign itself, you can't see how everything you've set up is actually functioning, because we need to be able to see that on our actual storefront. So that process of sort of testing what you set up, you would export the MEX file, import it into MegaEdit, test its behavior. If there's any problems, you would just make the changes in Invent and re-export it, and you could overwrite the MEX file that's been utilized on that product. So it's a really simple, really quick process to sort of iterate the design, if you will. Okay, so when we're going through the export process, Invent will also try and validate your template prior to export. And that's just it looking for some basic problems that it might come up against. So let's take a quick look at that. So we've set up all of this behavior. We've set up all of these different rules and resources and what have you. If we now go over to the Export tab, quite simple. You'll see that we have a summary of all of the things that are going to be included in that particular export, sort of how many fields are set to be variable, set to be dynamic, if we're including any resources, how many pages are part of your product and template. And then all we've got to do is to actually specify an export file. Let me just do a new version of my business card and then click Start Validations. Now, you might get a few different messages appearing here. I've exported this before and resolved any minor problems, so mine's just asking me to save the document before I export it. You might see messages in here such as things not being linked up. So let's say you had a box here that you'd said that you want to link to a variable, but you hadn't specified what the variable was. It would point that out, so you could go ahead and fix it before wasting your time with the export, basically. You also see you've got things such as fonts. Now, we're not going to dig into too much detail of this, but safe to say that cloud fonts are not currently supported, but we do sort of provide you with functionality to get around that problem. So if there is a cloud font that's being utilized, you have got the ability to replace it with a font that you actually have available, so installed on your local machine, for example, or that you can upload the file for. So wherever that cloud font is found, it will automatically be replaced in the export. Okay, so let's just pretend I've exported that. And then to actually get that back into MegaEdit, all I need to do is to go to my catalog. If I'm creating a brand new product, we do it in the usual way. We go to Add New. Specify that we want a MegaEdit product, as essentially these are what they will be. But you also then have the ability to upload the relevant indent package. So this will allow you to directly upload the MEX file. Let me try a different one, sorry. That one. And click Create. Now, this will save you quite a bit of time over manually doing this in MegaEdit, as all of those resources have been brought over automatically, and things such as the canvas, the stock selection, the output type, which you have to specify as part of a MegaEdit product, they've also been created based on the invent file, the InDesign file that you were initially using. So I've just pressed import on that, and now it's ready to view. I'm now ready to use that. If you wanted to override the MEX, so let's say you've made some changes and want to override it, it's simply a case of going to MegaEdit config or going to your MegaEdit products on the menu on the left. And then you've got this MEX import option. Now, that will show you all of the details of the MEX that you're currently utilizing, and you can override it with an updated version if you wish to do so as well. Okay, nearly there. So a couple of remaining tips and tricks for getting the most out of Invent. Now, these are just some which I've come across and which occurred to me. So one thing that is actually sometimes be a bit of a time saver is to use Invent to get a large number of fonts and other resources into MegaEdit quickly if you want to do so. So for most resource types, it might not save you too much time. You're essentially adding things to a folder. However, fonts can get a bit more involved if you're doing it directly into MegaEdit. So one thing which you might want to do, if you create a resource file with fonts in it, within Invent itself, just take a sort of template MEX file over to MegaEdit. All of those fonts can be uploaded in one for you to utilize and select across multiple products. So you can utilize those resource groups, categories over multiple products. Also, a good thing to do is to rename your InDesign fields to make them easily identifiable in Indent. So let me just show you what I mean. So let's say, for example, I have this image here, which I've just made variable. Now, if I go to my logic, I can create logic in here, which will allow me to actually control what that field does. So if I move it, if I show or hide it, it's a whole different thing. However, if I try and create it by default here, assuming I've not changed it previously, which it looks like I have done, if, try and recover, if you just enable that particular property and you haven't done any in advance steps, like it seems that I have, you might just get some kind of ID number, which doesn't really relate to anything specific. So it's quite difficult to identify what you're trying to apply rules to. You can see in this case that I've renamed all of the fields, so they're much easier to identify. So if I want to control the behavior of one of the fields, I can just select its name. This is really easy to do, and it's actually within InDesign itself. So if you go to the Layers tab within InDesign, again, you might need to activate it from the Windows section. It shows you all of the different elements within your particular artwork. If I select one of those, it will highlight which one it is, and I have the ability, if I like slow double click, to rename that field. And that's basically it. Taking the time to do that process with the fields that you want to make dynamic will save you a lot of pain going forwards. Okay, this one I've already talked about. So the tip to directly overwrite MEX files rather than creating a new product every time. And to be honest, this last one is general advice for quite a large area of Infigo, to be honest. So when you're actually configuring these products on your actual storefront, when you're changing things on your storefront itself, if for some reason you're seeing or you're not seeing the site update, so let's say you updated the MEX file, refreshed the product, and you didn't see any changes, you might want to remember to clear your cache. So this is a good habit to get into. Clear your browser cache. Make sure as well you click on the button on the top right of your Infigo admin window, which is the clear cache as well. This is not something that will affect your customers because they're just seeing the end result once you've created all of this. But when you're actually going through the process of configuring the site, of configuring the products, and you're changing things a lot, your web browser is probably just caching things in the background. So you might need to clear the cache in order to see the latest version. Okay, and we do have a bit of time for a Q&A. However, before that, there's one final question I want to ask you guys, which is the topic of the next webinar next month. So I want to make sure that the topics we cover are stuff that's relevant to you guys. So I've put up 4 potential topics that we might cover. So let me just activate that poll as well. If you can't see that, I have been informed that there is a button somewhere on your Livestorm area, which is a polls button, which might show that particular area. And what we've got in there is the choice between 4 webinar topics, making the most out of content templates, an introduction to Mega Edit, Infigo Insights reporting, or we can say getting to grips with attributes in Infigo. So if you've got a particular preference, please let us know. I see a few people have voted as already, so you can definitely see that, which is a comfort. Right. So I've had the questions window minimized. So let's see what we've got here. Okay, so we've got, can invent logic manipulate layers in InDesign? Not directly as far as I'm aware. I'm sure if I'm incorrect, one of the team will let me know and I can update. But the best way to do it is what I've shown you. So you would group things together and then control the group behavior that way. So when will Invent support rich text libraries? So as the specific answer is, I don't know. However, a useful thing to show you is the fact that we do have a roadmap for Invent, which I think is accessible to everybody. Give me 1 second. So we have an Invent feature roadmap. So we have a lot of plans for Invent and what we intend to do with it. If you want to see what we've got upcoming, then you can search for this. You should have access to it, and it will show you the information, show you what we're planning to bring into the Invent plugin in the coming months. Okay, let's take a look again. So does Invent have the ability to hold a library of preset designs or templates that customers can choose from? So that is something that is possible within Mega Edit. It's not something I think we can configure within Invent itself. So yeah, let me just show you that within Mega Edit itself. So if I go to our product list, it's actually controlled on a canvas level itself. There is Academy resources that go through this in much greater detail than me just thinking of an answer off the top of my head. But what we've essentially got in here, if I go to my Mega Edit canvas and edit that, we have a tab which is to do with the layout categories. All we need to do is create an entry in here, and then within the actual Mega Edit product itself, we'll then get access to a layouts tab over on the left-hand side. And you as the administrator can just set up fields as you like in your Mega Edit product. And then from that layouts tab over on the left, you have the ability to save that current configuration as a layout. So your customers will be able to just drag and drop from that particular area onto the canvas, and all of those fields will be replicated and put in place and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay, so in terms of changing to other measurement systems, I'm just having a look in our actual Invent tab here, the actual setup. So everything to do with Invent is controlled within this. There's no other sort of hidden settings or anything like that. Everything is within here. I'm just taking a look if we can control the measurement system, which I don't think we can. I'll take that question offline, as it may be something that's controlled within InDesign itself. So I can ask that question separately, and I'll get back to you. Okay, let me check the other chat. Okay, and the final question that we've got in the questions tab. I know there's a lot more stuff being talked about in the actual chat. I'll cover that later on. So does Invent support batch uploading of data sets to generate multiple products instead of manually inputting all the data? So at the moment, no. So we just sort of do it as we're doing at the moment. Again, that's something we can do within MegaEdit itself. We can link it so that the actual content of a template is populated via a CSV, for example, or a few different other formats. So let's say you wanted to create business cards for 200 different people within a company. You wouldn't have to manually put in all of that data. You could do it so that you upload the CSV and it automatically populates and gives you 200 different versions of that business card. That's not Invent, that is MegaEdit itself. And again, there's Academy resources which cover that in greater detail. Okay, and I think we're just about out of time. If there is any additional questions which have actually come in on the chat separately, I'll take a look at those once we've finished the session. Let me just check I've not missed anything important. No, I think we're good. Right, so if you want to look into any of these in any more detail, please do take a look at the Infigo Academy. I know a lot of you know about it already, but it's where we upload all of the different resources, all of the different videos that we create, and it is an ever-expanding database. You can directly get a link to it through our help center. You can actually get to it through Infigo admin itself as well. So if I go into the admin area, you'll see we've got the Infigo Academy button at the top of the screen, and that will take you directly to the YouTube channel. So everything we upload will be uploaded here, and I'll try and separate it out into as many different groups and categories as we possibly can. So that's it. I hope this has been useful for everybody. If you want to leave any feedback, I'd be happy to take it on board and try and improve these events in the future. But I hope you've enjoyed it. And as I say, we'll be hosting another one next month. So thank you very much, guys. And I'll see you next time.